Don't forget to visit marketingcasts.com to find even more custom curated marketing podcasts just like this one. That's marketingcasts.com. Hi, this is Sea Halter, host of the CMO Suite podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch up on all the previous episodes at www.thecmosuite.com. This episode of the CMO Suite is brought to you by Uconnect. Uconnect provides digital solutions and teams to brand CMOs, VPs, and marketers looking for true transparency in the biddable media space. From paid social and PPC to complex platforms like The Trade Desk, brands from across the world have connected to Uconnect. Visit them today at uconnect.com. And No Kid Hungry. We're proud to promote No Kid Hungry and their many initiatives to help kids in need of meals. Visit them at nokidhungry.org. This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. Winmo tracks every national advertiser, their agency relationships, and key executives within each organization. Get instant media spend, competitor tracking, and industry trend analysis in one easy-to-use application that integrates with all major CRM platforms. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite. Finally, the CMO Suite is presented by the CMOcouncil.org as their official marketers podcast. The Chief Marketing Officer Council is the only global network of executives specifically dedicated to high-level knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and personal relationship building among senior corporate marketing leaders and brand decision makers. The CMO Council's 15,000 plus members control more than $550 billion in aggregated annual marketing expenditures and run complex distributed marketing and sales operations worldwide. For more information on membership, visit thecmocouncil.org. Let's start the show.
You're in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You are listening to the CMO Suite. We are kicking off Season 5. I am your host, Sea Halter. As a reminder, the CMO Suite is presented in part by Uconnect. Uconnect is a biddable media provider to agencies and brands across the U.S. We are super excited to have as our guest on this show, Jeannine D'Addario. Jeannine is the CMO at Guitar Center. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. I'm glad to be here.
I feel like you and I may have talked a little bit off and on about the fact that we used to do most of these episodes out of New York and Los Angeles. And one of the things that precluded us from being able to do when we're recording in those areas is we can't always have guests in from other markets. We always used to have all of our guests in studio. There's a beauty or a blending of that. But COVID has allowed us to kind of level set a little bit. So the positive thing is we've been able to talk to guests from really all over the country and a couple of international ones last year. And as we kind of look forward to this year, the downside is, things like your dog in the background when your foot hits something and suddenly, everybody thinks there's an intruder taking place. And Jeannine, you have a dog as well. Am I correct?
I do. I have a corgi who is sitting here. I'm surprised he didn't bark when he heard your dog.
That's right.
But he is the ultimate guard dog protector. So the minute there's something awry, he will be barking.
Speaking of that a bit, talk to me about where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California, just outside of Sacramento. My family moved when I was in high school up to Auburn, California, which is part of Gold Country. It's Sierra Foothills. Probably you've seen it if you've driven up to go skiing in Tahoe. You go right past Auburn. Great burger stop to stop and grab a burger on your way.
In your current position as the CMO for Guitar Center, I'm sure that COVID has had an impact on just that part of it. So before we talk a little bit more about your family and kind of how you got into the industry, talk about maybe just that for a little bit right off the bat. How has COVID impacted not only the retail industry as a whole, but really Guitar Center?
So I'll talk first about, the support center, which is our headquarters. And obviously we're in Los Angeles County. So we are still not open. But, that has been a challenge in and of itself. So being 100% work from home, going from everybody in the office to the next day being 100% work from home, it's been a challenge to keep people engaged and keep, the communication happening. We are our own in-house creative agency. So doing creative by Zoom is really interesting. But I would say that we've become closer as a team because we recognize we have to be to work through all of this. I've also become the complete nerd. When I get on to present, I'm giving away awards and gift cards and, anything just to keep people, kind of feeling part of the team and part of the organization. And so we have that challenge. And then, our stores went through what all retail went through this last year with nearly 2 months of full closures. And then, fits and starts as you have, COVID cases, or you have surges in different markets, stores open and close. We've also been sort of capacity constrained in stores where you can only have so many people in. That's put some, pressure on our in-store lessons, because you have to have distance and space, and so we can't use all of our studios to meet the need of lessons. We pivoted very quickly to move to online lessons for a lot of our students. We pivoted quickly to add curbside, pickup, so you didn't have to come in store if you ordered online. We also, realized, that when we were shut down with our stores, that we couldn't access the inventory in our stores. So we very quickly ramped up a pick, pack, and ship program, where if the inventory wasn't in the distribution centers, we could pull it from stores. So it's been a lot of massive shift, around just getting the business up and operational and keeping it operational and engaging with customers.
I saw that you worked for Miller Coors for a
Yes,
little
I
while.
did.
Was that kind of one of your first forays into marketing? You were there for over a decade.
Yep, I was there for over a decade. So I started out when I was in college, I was a Coors campus rep, which when we did those things back then, which was my first introduction to really, truly one-to-one marketing, but also to beer. I was in college. Beer was like something I got to learn about. I love the beverage business. And so I was thrilled to join, Coors, or Miller Coors. It was Coors at the time when I started. And really gave me a deeper understanding of retail, gave me a great understanding of regional marketing, field-based marketing, and then ultimately moved into working in brand and promotion and sports marketing and all of those components. That was really my first introduction. Now, I had come out of college thinking that I was going to be a journalist. I had studied, journalism and business in school, or communications and business in school, and then took a job at a local station in Monterey Salinas, KMSW, which was an ABC affiliate. And I did the 4 o'clock news for about 8 months and decided I really hated it. It was all about me reading other people's work, and I really wanted to be developing stories myself. And so I love the idea of brand building because it's all about storytelling. And so I made a shift. I went back to grad school, and then, came back out and worked in the beer business.
It was my introduction to the agency space. I was in media sales for quite a while. I worked at one of the rock stations, so it was pretty much beers, bars, and cars. That was pretty much all of our business.
Yeah.
But Coors was one of my accounts at the time. I worked with Rosie Aldashi, who was out of Atlanta for a while, and I got to do a lot of the same kind of stuff that you were talking about from the media side. But I rode on trucks to better understand what these guys were out there selling, and you get everything. I mean, it was almost like graduate school. You get a little touch of everything. You get event marketing, like you talked about. You get sales. You can understand off-premise versus on-premise. I mean, if you can spend any time in that, and that part hasn't really changed that much. Sure, some COVID elements to it, but that industry being able to kind of touch all of these things, and if you're willing to kind of learn, I learned so much from that beer business. Enough so that then when we finally did open an agency, we got the chance at some point to work with Pabst and that whole group, and the Metropolis brothers owned it. And man, we got to do some really cool stuff. I mean, to be in New York City, looking up at a 12-story skyscraper that we had hand painted for PBR, it was amazing.
Incredible.
Really fun. So then you went from there, and then you ended up at PepsiCo for a little while as well. That seems like the same kind of thing. There's almost like this PepsiCo alumni group that still seems to be floating out around there. It's almost like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everybody who's anybody seems to have at least touched or been there or been around the PepsiCo at some point. I see that more than I see Coke for some reason. I'm not sure why. I
Well,
see it a lot.
it's interesting. And I don't know why, but I always think about my time at Pepsi's. I went to the school of Pepsi. Pepsi is incredibly strategic, a lot of driver personalities, a lot of very competitive, within the industry, and it gives you just a tremendous foundation. There's the one thing, and I carry it with me everywhere I've gone since then, that I remember from Pepsi, is just their idea of first focus. And first focus is making sure that everybody knows what we're focusing on, when and why. And you could talk to anybody from the CEO to a driver on a Pepsi route, and they absolutely know what we're focused on, when and why we're doing it. I launched a lot of products at Pepsi because I had carbonated soft drinks expansion. So, Mountain Dew Live Wire, Mountain Dew Code Red, Pepsi Vanilla, Pepsi Twist, all of those at the time was the big gain for market share and for shelf space. So launching a product at Pepsi is how to learn how to do it in a way that nobody else can, to literally work the time to get it right, to pick that date to launch it, to go out to stores the next day and see we're at 99% ACV. It's spectacular. And so that learning that comes out of Pepsi, and then I think it's also a place where a lot of folks, go to recruit out of Pepsi because they know that capability and that, that the ability to focus on not only strategy, but execution, and really saying what you're going to do and then making it happen.
Yeah, I feel like some of the people that I talk to that have come through Pepsi also have maybe a deeper potential understanding of how P&L works and the impact, again, of specific sales and retail and all those pieces. Did you live in New York City when you were working for them, or were you out in Los Angeles?
I was in New York, but I lived in Connecticut. So because they're in Purchase, they're not in New York City. So they're out in Westchester County. It was really the first time I had lived on the East Coast. My husband is from the East Coast, but I had never lived on the East Coast. So it was a great experience, and being close to the city and just all the excitement of the ad business then was pretty fun.
We have some clients in New York as well. I took one of my Florida employees there last year pre-COVID, and it only took her maybe 13, 14 minutes to become a New Yorker. We get off the subway and she's like, "Oh, we're in New York. It's so beautiful and everything." A guy bumps into her and she's like, "Hey, I'm walking." It's just, I don't know. There's something about New York. So, and then you came back out west, it looks like. Was that to work for Walt Disney Company?
Yes, it was. I was recruited to come to the Walt Disney Company, which was a brand that I've always loved. Really was proud to be part of, excited to be part of. The funny thing, I tell this story to everybody, as you do in 8th grade or whatever grade it is, you pick your stock and you watch it all year. And I picked Disney, and I won the chocolate bar at the end of the year for that stock performance. So I was very proud. But it was a thrill for me to come to the Walt Disney Company. And I always look at sort of, what do you learn along the way in your career, and how do you grow? And I talk about the strategy that I learned at Pepsi. Really what I learned at the Walt Disney Company is the art of storytelling. And it's not just storytelling as it relates to a film, a movie, a TV show, a book, what have you. It is the storytelling of the business. It's the storytelling of the brand. And it's the way that people connect with brands and marketing through story. That was just a tremendous growth opportunity for me.
Again, your background and your experience of places that you've been, you don't always see somebody who's been in this business who's spent 10 years at companies. The tenure for a CMO or a VP of marketing, or almost anybody sometimes in marketing, is a couple years. You're in, you kind of learn, then you end up either moving up or out, or some kind of chaos happens, and marketing is always the first one to take some of the blame for that. But your story, it's funny for you to use the word storytelling. Your background really tells a story. Your background really tells this journey and tells your story and tells your journey. You've got so many blue chip brands that are on there to some extent early in your career that what I took from it, at least initially, before you and I have had a chance really to talk, is that's really where you were able to kind of come into your own and understand the business of this business, and take those things away to then, rather than being the one to kind of scoop up all that information, it almost seemed like you had this tipping point maybe in your career, like we all do, where now you've gathered up a lot of that information, and now you're starting to tip back into some brands where you're the one who's kind of leading some of that conversation and strategy that you've linked up along the way. Do you think that's a fair assessment to some extent?
Absolutely. Absolutely fair. And I think I go back to, I made a shift out of Disney. I was recruited to Stanford and Stanford Medicine, of all things. Now, I have no healthcare experience. And I give a lot of credit to Stanford's forward thinking that they recognize that the business of healthcare is a business of healthcare, and that, you know, healthcare needs to have the same care and attention as any other brand. And they were looking for somebody who deeply understood the customer, who could really bring the visual storytelling to life for the brand. And so I went into it, and they said, well, you know, when I was interviewing with their folks in the board and so on, they said, well, why you? You have no healthcare experience. And I said, you don't need somebody with healthcare experience. You have lots of that. You need somebody who really understands marketing and branding and brand building, because that is the game that you are in. And it was a really great opportunity to talk about the strength of marketing and branding into an industry that really had never considered it. Now that has changed significantly over the time, but you know, at the time Stanford was, or it still is, a research, you know, academic medical institution. And for most folks, that's scary. You know, it's scary to go in and be surrounded by doctors learning from your case. And we really wanted to talk about just the level of care and capability that that the institution could provide, and particularly around, you know, the Children's Hospital and Children's Services. You know, as a parent myself, seeing, you know, kids cared for in a way that is exemplary is all you want for your child when they're sick. And so to be able to bring that storytelling forward was just, it's magical.
I'm going to spend a little time, because you guys are actually on TikTok maybe as much as you know, or maybe even more than you know. There's a couple of guys that have followed on my feed that that get product from you guys. There's a guy, and I can't remember his name literally off the top of my head, but he's like this old school bluesy guy. And I'm, you know, flipping through my FYP the other day, and he comes on and he's like, I want to thank Guitar Center. This is Old Yeller. And I'm just like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's not all just a bunch of 10, 20-year-olds. This guy's got to be, I don't know, 75. Do you know the guy I'm talking about, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think he's in his 80s. And did you hear him play and sing?
Yes.
He's unbelievable.
That was really cool. That was a surprising thing for me to see. I've seen plenty of brand integration across social, but that was just cool. It was, and the guitar was beautiful, and his voice, you know, was amazing. And so that to me was a really cool, interesting thing. But the other note I was going to add, other than a nice plug for the job you guys are doing, the amazing job you're doing there at Guitar Center. As a reminder, this is Jeannine D'Addario, CMO for Guitar Center. We're talking to her a bit about her journey. You were talking about healthcare, and one of the other things that I saw on the other day was somebody kind of saying, when you're healthy, you want to, you know, make as much money as you can. Maybe when you're unhealthy, you only want one thing, you know, to be healthy. You know, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. So it seemed like when you ended up back there, it almost became a communication role again. And maybe that had not been back at the forefront for you for a little while, or maybe it was woven in, but that was definitely a key component of that. And so then you went from there to be the CMO SVP, Chief Marketing Communication Officer at Whole Foods.
At Whole Foods.
I mean, you had not hit enough of the blue chips. You had to just squeeze one more in. Did you move to Austin for that job?
I moved to Austin, Texas. Yes, I did. Which you know, for those that live in Austin, shout out. It's an amazing city. By the way, the best live music. So I can't wait for live music to come back and go visit my friends in Austin. But yeah, I went to Whole Foods. This was pre-Amazon. It was an opportunity that was presented to me because of a connection through Stanford, through one of the board of trustee members who was also the CEO at the time, one of the CEOs at the time at Stanford. And, you know, it was one of those moments. I mean, I had been a devout Whole Foods shopper before. My grandmother was a chef. I like to consider myself a foodie. I like to consider myself, you know, that's my spare time thing. So the opportunity to go into Whole Foods, who'd really never had, you know, national level marketing before. It had all been very regional. You know, Whole Foods grew through acquisition, and to tell a very compelling story about the quality of the food that we eat and why that is so important, was pretty amazing. And, you know, stayed there for a period of time up until the Amazon acquisition, and stayed a little bit after that to help with the transition. But amazing business. You know, the thing that I love the best of what we did at Whole Foods was really bringing content to play. talking about, stories, how food is made and grown and cultured and cultivated and foraged for, and, talking to people that had just amazing, connections and backgrounds, like the cheesemonger or the head of our cheese buying, who was the most incredible person I'd ever seen, who knew every cheesemaker in the world by name, by first name. Could talk extensively about, the lines and the products that they made. And to put that kind of person on camera and to have them share their journey and talk about what they know, it was powerful.
2014 doesn't seem like that long ago. It's 6, 7 years ago. But the reality was, I remember the first time I came to Austin. It's one of my second or third favorite cities in the country. We handled Lone Star Beer there and a bunch of other brands. I can't go there enough. It's an amazing city, getting more expensive to live there now. But I remember the first time I drove by and I was like, oh, that's like Whole Foods, like they're here. And their agency was just across the street at the time. And I got a chance to kind of meet some people over there. And I was enamored by that. But you guys were really one of those on the cutting edge, to your point of, our cheese, person knows all of these people. Some other places may have had some similar relationships, but they weren't talking about it.
Right.
They were talking about, here's my BOGO and here's, my white label chips that are going to be, 16 cents less expensive. And so I felt like your time there was part of that real renaissance for Whole Foods to say, look, nobody wants to overpay for groceries, but let's talk about quality. And if that's really what you're looking for, and there's plenty of people that are, let's talk to you about what that means and what that experience is going to be like if you become, a Whole Foods shopper, which again, almost, I feel like built up this almost Tesla feeling of loyalty to this scrappy brand that some way, somehow, even with the Amazon acquisition, still feels a little scrappy. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. I mean, I think it's a little different with the Amazon acquisition because of the integration of some of the Amazon opportunities like Prime and all of that. But it is a scrappy brand. If you think about it, the grocery business is massive. It is a massive multi-billion-dollar business. Whole Foods is less than 1% of that business. It's a very small, percent, but it has significant influence on the business. And, I think a lot of the changes that we're seeing in healthy food across the country came out of the thinking and the vision of the founder and those that worked on that brand at the very beginning on what food should and could be for people. And so, the advent of more organic across the spectrum of grocery, the advent of less processed foods across the spectrum of grocery certainly had an impact or was impacted by, the leadership of Whole Foods. Even some of the work around animal welfare that Whole Foods, championed and marine, welfare has made its way across multiple, grocers and retailers. And that's a great thing to see a brand at that level, that share of the business having that level of impact on an entire industry. It shows that the little guy matters.
Talk to us then about heading back out west and how you ended up at Guitar Center.
So we've been in Austin for a while. My husband is a consultant. He had worked in investment and finance, and he had an opportunity to come to Los Angeles and take on a role that was kind of his dream job. And we've always moved for mine. And so it was the right time to make a trip back to Los Angeles. I felt like I had enough, relationships and contact in multiple industries here. So I decided I would consult and he would work full-time in his new role. And I did a variety of things, working with NBC Universal, working with DreamWorks at the time, launched a film with DreamWorks. And then I met a woman named Julia Stewart, who was the chairman CEO of Dine Brands, which is Applebee's and IHOP. And we built a great relationship. And she asked me to come in and help her out on they had a CMO transition and needed some assistance on some problems they were having with a line that they had launched. And I took on that role as an interim, thinking, I'm not going to do this for very long because I've got all these other projects piling up. And loved working for her, loved working with her. We had a great, bond. One of the things that I would say is, for any CMO, your relationship with your CEO is paramount. And not that you need to go out, to the bar and hang out and, be together every weekend. That's not the point. It's that connection of I get you. I understand you. I know where you're headed. You know where I'm headed, and the two are aligned. And
Really, it's trusting this person's got my back. I've got theirs. We're going to have good days. We're also going to have some bad days. And when we have bad days, I'm not nervous that I'm going to get called in and fired. I'm going to get called and we're going to have a conversation wrapped around it.
And it's okay to disagree. I mean, I think there's something really powerful in that trust that allows you to disagree because you're going to get to a better place, as opposed to not disagreeing out of fear. So we have that, really great relationship. I think we did a lot of good things during the time. It's a tough business. It's a franchise business. Plus you have, food cost, and you have transportation and consistency. There's a lot that goes into working in the the casual restaurant business. I learned a ton. We had a lot of fun. And then she left the company. And at that point, they were making some changes in leadership. I left the company to come to work for Guitar Center. And, when I got the call from Guitar Center of, would you be interested in talking to us? I have to admit, my inner band nerd got really excited about that. I had played flute and sax all the way through junior high school, and even into college. And I was always a music lover. Most of my friends that I still keep in touch with from my early days were band members. And it was kind of a cool thing. I went to talk to their leadership and get to know them to see if there was an opportunity. And I loved the people. It was my band crew. And they have this wonderful focus on their mission, which is putting more music in the world. And what could be better than that? And so, when they offered me the opportunity to take this role, I jumped at it because all of those things matter. Who you work with matters. How you feel about the mission of the company matters. And I connected with it. And it has been just the best ride, since making that decision. Even though I was just going to consult, I quickly found that this was something I wanted to do.
Did you also maybe find that the fact that they are music, in essence, that that weaves through everybody's body? It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, old, young, political. Music is basically the lifeblood of what we live for to some extent.
We were talking about music. We did a campaign this last holiday time period where we brought in over 25 different artists, and we had them talk about why they make music. And to just hear this universal conversation around, what it means to them personally, that it is the light that they need at the end of each day. It is the solace that they seek. It is the expression that they seek. Just hearing people talk about music in a way that isn't just about selling albums, and it isn't just about, getting streams or being on TikTok. It really is a human, joyful experience that matters to people. And it was really powerful to hear that. We had artists from, the Grammy Award winning Her and Phineas, who are spectacular, all the way to an up and coming artist, Hasib, who's actually an employee of Guitar Center, to Juanes, to, Mike Campbell, who played for years and years and years with Tom Petty, all talking about music in a way that was deeply, deeply personal, but how much it connected with others and across the world. And it was, it brought me to tears hearing people's stories.
I do also feel like through all of the chaos of COVID, that music has helped, especially across some of the social platforms, when you're cutting through some of the political chatter, again, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Music, especially on TikTok, that's been, it helps really carry through with that. So listen, we've got a few minutes left. Again, it's Jeannine D'Addario. She is the CMO at Guitar Center. We've been talking all about marketing, about her path, about her journey. You talked about your kids. Talk a little bit more about them. How many kids do you have?
I just have one. I have a daughter. She is 21 and she is a junior in college. She was home for most of the COVID, work from home or live in your house and never leave kind of thing. Yeah. She just moved back to school. She goes to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. She's just moved back into an apartment with her girlfriend. So I'm, as of about 2 weeks ago, an empty nester again. But she's a great kid. First of all, she's a spectacular writer, and never, I think, really recognized that until she started doing more of it in school. I would love to see her, really take advantage of her writing capability. I will tell you, she writes better than anybody I've seen. She certainly writes better than me. In fact, there's been some speeches I've asked her to kind of come in and fine tune that I've written, and she's done a better job than I did. So I think somewhere around writing, she's very interested in the entertainment business, production, et cetera. She's willing to work, from the ground up. And I think you'll see her doing something around, producing, directing, writing in the future.
It's exciting to see our kids grow up and then kind of find their way and their path, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that she's 21 and not 7. So I guess that's every parent, right?
Appreciate you joining us on the show. I told you it would be a half an hour. That went ridiculously fast. Could have spent another half an hour with you just kind of digging into really some of the the grittiness of some of the other things that you've learned along the way. So I appreciate you taking some time for us. I appreciate you being on season 5 of the show. We do this thing each season where we also bring some guests back from some previous seasons. I hope you'll provide us, perhaps. I've chased you long enough now. I hope you see, I don't bite, right?
I know.
This wasn't so bad. It wasn't so scary.
It's fun.
We'd love to maybe have you back on and really kind of just dig into some of that meat, because again, your trajectory has been a really interesting one where you've really spent some time at some really, really interesting companies that were innovative, and you were there at the time of that innovation, which should be some indication of the fact that maybe you know a little bit about how to do this crazy thing called marketing.
So far, so good. There's, for every success, there are certainly failures, and we try to celebrate those too. I would love to come back, but let's do it, when we can both sit down and have a beer on the call. So maybe we'll do it a little later in the day. And I would love that.
So listen, Jeannine D'Addario, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the CMO Suite.
Thanks for hanging out in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You're a C-level manager. You shouldn't have to know the difference between behavioral or contextual targeting, but your agency should. Uconnect provides brands and biddable teams direct access to platforms like The Trade Desk, Google, Amazon, Facebook, OTT, and more. Their US-based traders can train your in-house team or provide complete transparency with no minimums and CPM-based service pricing for true transparency. Something Mighty Hive, The Trade Desk, and Centro simply don't offer. Tired of being the smartest one in the room? Reach out to Uconnect today for a free demo. Uconnect, the world's leader in true transparent biddable media.
This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite.